Hello, friends, and welcome back to Ghouls Night In, the spooky chat show with your best ghoul friends. I'm Penny Snark.
And I'm Midge Munster. And this Penny today is an episode I have been wanting to do for such a long time, and I have been waiting for the right moment. And I'm so excited to
Mmm.
finally talk about our queen, our bisexual icon, Miss Mary Shelley.
Ah, such an icon.
Such an icon.
The goth
Uh,
bisexual woman of our dreams.
exactly. uh, she is so incredible. If you watch Queer for Fear, you may have a little bit of this backstory about this, like the newer developments, not newer in the context of she wrote things about it when she was alive. So that's certainly not new. But that it is becoming more accepted that she was a bisexual woman, but she's also just an incredible human being. And I can't wait to share with you a bunch of information about her.
Yes.
I will say, I know there's a lot of people who are like Mary Shelley diehards, and while I love her, I only really started learning about her in the last like couple of years. So please be kind to me if I get anything wrong here and correct me and let me know, but in a nice way.
Please be nice.
Please be nice. I just want to tell her story well. That's honestly why I put this episode off so long. I was like, I want to tell it the
Yeah.
right way because she's so great. But let's jump in. It's important to note uh, of all the things that you know Mary Shelley became and who she was, where that all kind of started. First and foremost was with her upbringing and her parents. She was born in London in 1797 to Father William Godwin and Mother Mary Wollstonecraft, which is an
Hell yeah.
incredible last name. um, and they were both also exceptional human beings. Her father was a very well known and respected philosopher who had written a whole inquiry on political justice. And his writing basically became the Bible for British radicals during the French Revolution.
Hell yeah.
And his work is the first real modern work to flesh out the idea of anarchy. So already starting out strong.
Yes.
We have people with a lot of bold ideas who are not conforming to society's norms. Mary's mother, a lot of you may already know, was also a pioneer, and has been deemed by many as Britain's first feminist.
Yes.
By the time she married Mary's father, she had already like traveled the world by herself and mothered a child out of wedlock, and which is scandalo at the time.
Escandalo.
That's actually, I always title my sections as I'm writing these podcast episodes. And the first part of this is titled Mary's Early Life / Escandalo.
Oh, excellent.
But Mary's mom, she authored a Vindication for Rights of Women, is the name of the piece she wrote. And she was a champion for equal education for women. She believed that parenting responsibilities should be equally divided between both parties in the household. She was just like Miss Equality for female people.
An icon also.
An icon. Unfortunately, our icon died only 11 days after Mary was born.
Rip.
So while Mary didn't have her mother in her life influencing her, she was still a really profound part of Mary's life. She learned about her through her writings, and Mary's father wrote a biography about Mary's mother later. And that was actually quite another scandal because both parents were really progressive, and that book kind of shined a light on some more non-traditional things that were happening in their household. They had a fairly chill view of monogamy and weren't super like, it wasn't like a big deal to them.
Yeah.
Which now let's hunker down here. Most people at this time would have been like, that's scandalous. But also,
Mhm.
most of these people we know were doing
Oh,
some kind
yeah.
of something, right?
Oh, yeah. You
But
just
they were
didn't talk about it.
right. So, really, what was happening here is that the Godwin Wollstonecrafts were just honest about it. They were just like, yeah, that's what we're doing. They raised Mary's mother's other daughter, Fanny, from her lover together. And then they also had a second daughter, Claire, who was the daughter of Mary's father and his lover, also named Mary. Everybody's named. There's
lot of Marys in here.
there's something about Mary. Uh, but yeah, his lover, Mary Jane Claremont, they had a daughter, which they named Claire. I can't get over this. Who names their child Claire Claremont? That's a hate crime.
That's rough.
I
That's
hate
rough,
it.
guys.
So yeah, Claire Claremont is born just a few months before Mary Shelley, and they were raised together. After the passing of Mary's mother, her father does end up marrying Claire's mom, and then they're a blended family from that point forward. But she has a pretty good relationship with her stepsister. But they kind of aired all this out to the public and were like, yeah, we're blended, we're cool, we have lovers, we raise each other's children, we're like a little commune, it's cool. And people did not think that was cool.
No. They're like, in fact, we do not find this cool.
In fact, no. But again, very informative to Mary Shelley's upbringing and how she saw the world. Her parents were very similar to like the free love movement of the 60s. They were just kind of like self before all, and just, if you feel that something is right for you, you should do it. So at 16, Mary meets poet Percy Bysshe Shelley. That's his name. Bysshe. Bysshe.
All right, Bish.
Which I love that. I'm going to actually change my name to Midge Bish.
Swish, swish, Bish.
But they begin like a pretty hot and heavy affair from the get-go. And Mary's 16, he's 21. But, it's 17 something at this point.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, that's pretty normal. But they're really drawn to each other because they're both highly intelligent, and they both are pretty radical in the society of London at this time. Percy is known for his writing and he's been thrown out of Oxford at this point.
Oh,
like I read one thing that called him the bad boy of Oxford. But he's been thrown out of college because he's writing all kinds of radical stuff about the government. And he is also married at this point already when he meets Mary Shelley. Well, she's not Mary Shelley yet, I guess. She's Mary Godwin at this point. But he, like a few months after he gets married, he's writing this manifesto about how being married is like being dead and alive at the same time, because like a part of your soul dies when you get married.
Thanks, Percy.
So he's not a proponent of marriage, and yet here we are. But we believe that even though he was, not super about marriage, and Mary was obviously pretty open to the idea of non-monogamy, they were still kind of keeping their affair a secret. And for that reason, a story which many of us know, they would meet in private at her mother's grave, because that's a normal thing to do with your lover.
The most romantic place that you could hang out.
Yes. I don't know whose idea this was, but I have a feeling it was Mary's.
Yeah, I feel like that's likely.
Yeah, because like, if it wasn't, what a weird suggestion, Percy. Like, right. Hey, you want to meet me at your dead mom's grave? But also, like, regardless, Mary going for the idea of like, if you want to be my lover, you got to kiss me over my dead mom's body, is like the most goth thing that I can possibly think of. And many people believe that this is also where she was deflowered, and that they would have their relations at her mother's grave. So
I'm doing eyebrow things you can't see.
OG goth girl, Mary Shelley.
Yes.
So after a couple, months of this, her and Percy are kind of found out. Mary's father is not happy. Even though Percy was kind of a like educational disciple of her father, uh, he's an adult and Mary's 16,
Yeah.
and they're like, that's not cool. So Mary and Percy decide to elope, and in 1814 they leave town. And at that point they are expecting their first child. Their daughter Clara was born the following year when
Clara
Mary.
again.
Well, yeah,
There's only 2 names in
it,
this family.
it was Claire before. Now this is Claire.
Okay.
So we've spiced it up.
Still.
No, I know. I had that same. I was like, God dang, people, draw like a name out of a hat or
Right?
something.
I'm like, does Percy not have any names in his family that he'd like to repeat?
Well, that the other option was to name their daughter Bish. So, but Clara is born the following year when Mary is 17. Clara is born 2 months premature and unfortunately dies pretty
Mhm.
shortly after. Now, this is going to seem like a hard left, but I promise you it's not. Let's talk about Frankenstein.
Hey.
um, because so much of this lead up is so influential to Mary's writing. So we all kind of know, I think, the base story that gets really circulated and romanticized about how Frankenstein came to be. But in case you do not, after the passing of Clara, Mary's sister Claire suggested that they take a trip to Switzerland to see her lover, who is the poet Lord Byron. And so Percy, Claire, Mary, Lord Byron, and his physician, wink, wink, John.
You know.
You know,
You know
uh,
when you bring your physician with you
yeah,
on
your
your fun
close
trip.
personal doctor friend. Um, John, they all meet together at this villa that is Lord Byron's in Switzerland. And on a dark and stormy night, they're deciding to pass the time by holding a contest to see who can write the scariest story. And uh, that's how, it's commonly told how Frankenstein came to be, which it is. That is what happened. But I think a lot of people credit it like, sure, this is the perfect setting to write a horror novel in. There's this spooky house and you're on a creepy lake and it's storming and you're with your friends and you're doing opium. And um, but there were lots of things that led up to her having the idea for this story. We already addressed the fact that Mary is the original goth girl. Her interests were weird and vast and fascinating, and a lot of them contributed to her ideas to pioneer this new genre. So she was very interested in science and had been to see demonstrations at the Royal Institute in London, where they would show how electricity could, quote, reanimate dead muscle tissue,
Mm.
which of course we now know that's not true.
Yeah.
It's just a reaction to electricity going through muscle tissue. But at this time, they really believed there might be something to electricity being able to bring the dead back to life. And Mary was also inspired by a little gentleman by the name of Etienne Gaspard Robert Robertson. And you may be thinking, boy, howdy, Midge, that crazy name sure does sound familiar. And this was our guy, our Phantasmagoria guy,
Hey!
Etienne. So
Etienne! It's been so long.
yes, so Etienne was the one who really brought Phantasmagoria to prominence and literally wrote the book on how to
Yeah.
produce ghost stories. And so Mary had read his book and she was very interested in that idea as well of like setting the scene and telling a scary story. So she had some background there as well. It's also obviously no secret that Mary's life, while amazing and full of lots of cool things and success, was also just wrought with personal tragedy.
Mhm.
Um, and at this point, when she's 18, like she has only incurred like a small fragment of the just
Yeah.
awful loss that she will experience over the next several years. Um, but it's already taking its effects on her in a big way. And she is having dreams and nightmares. And there is a recorded instance in her journal where she wrote that she dreamed that her baby Clara, when she was born, was just cold, and that they held her next to the fire and rubbed her body until she warmed up and brought her back to life. And so
Mm.
Mary has a real fascination on this idea
Yeah.
of bringing the dead back. And she had heard a story as well of Conrad Dippel, who was supposedly this kind of mad anatomist in Germany who had tried to make a concoction out of blood and bone, like ground up bone, that there's different kind of tellings of this, either that he injected it into corpses to bring them back, or that it was like an oil meant to be applied to living people to um, keep them alive, like immortal, basically.
Mhm.
uh, and these events supposedly took place at a castle located on the Rhine River in Germany called the Rock on the Franks, or in German,
Mm.
Borg Frankenstein.
Frankenstein.
Frankenstein. Um, so she had heard these stories. They're at this villa in Switzerland. And in that moment, 18-year-old Mary Shelley not only won that contest amongst her friends, by the way, she
Hell yeah, she did.
smoked them.
Take that,
um,
Byron.
yeah, F you. No, they were good friends. It's fine.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Lord Byron's just you gotta take your W's when you can with Lord
Right,
Byron.
right. But she also, in this moment, basically single-handedly invents horror as we know it, and forever kind of ties Gothic literature with horror together in a way that hadn't really been done previously. And so it's like I said, this moment has been heavily played upon and
Mhm.
romanticized and dramatized, but it's a revolutionary moment in time.
For sure.
And so Mary then continues to write the story of Frankenstein, because obviously she didn't write the whole novel in that night. She
Yes.
wrote like a mini version, little mini sode,
A
and
teaser.
a teaser, an appetizer, and then goes back and continues to write Frankenstein over the next 9 months while she is pregnant with her third child. We did skip in there. She had had a second child already by the time they go to the villa. Their son William, who did survive.
Good job, William.
Yay, William. Um, but she is pregnant again. She's writing, and then comes with this first novel, and publishers refused to take it.
Boo.
Even with which, you know, she's in a unique position here where even in this time where women are not really taken seriously, she's surrounded herself with men who actually think she's pretty cool. Like her
Yeah.
husband's like into the fact that she's weird, and Lord Byron's the king of the disaster bisexuals.
Yes.
Um, so Percy and Lord Byron take this like to their publishers and are like, please publish this. And they're like, nah. So she fights that uphill battle for quite some time. But then finally, in January of 1818, the novel gets published in 3 volumes by Leckington and Company. However, Mary's name was not published with it.
Mm.
Wah, wah.
Wah, 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 wah.
But they did something big, smart, which was there is, however, a dedication to her father,
Hey.
and the foreword to Frankenstein is written by one Percy Bysshe Shelley.
Hmm. How mysterious.
Yes, so
Who could have written
strange.
this?
Whoever could this be tied to? So people start speculating pretty quick. Well, a lot of people think that her husband wrote it at first, but people who are like in the know are like, yeah,
They're like, this goth shit, this is Mary.
that's Mary's shit right there. Well, and people knew her parents too,
Yeah.
and knew how intellectual they were. They knew that Mary had received a lot more education than most women would have at that time, and that she was very smart. So people start connecting the dots and realizing that she's written this. Um, that didn't set well with a lot of people, obviously. There was one quote that I absolutely loved, a review that said, like, uh, the horrors were too exceedingly bizarre, and that like it was just absolutely, oh yeah, um British critic wrote, "The horror that abounds is so grotesque and bizarre." Like, it yes, but also, like, have you read Frankenstein? I don't think it's any worse than anything else.
No, yeah,
Um,
I guess, like, in olden times, if you're not used to reading anything that's weird, you're like, "What?
but
What's
also, like, I
this?"
think the idea that a woman could conceive of it
Yeah,
was, like, what
yeah,
was really freaking people out, right?
right, how very
Um,
dare a woman be weird.
how dare her? But there were also a lot of really positive reviews that were like, "She's a genius," which she was.
Mhm.
And so several years go by, lots of mixed reviews. During this time, Percy passes away.
Oh.
And then finally, in 1823, Frankenstein is republished with Mary's name on the cover.
Yay.
Yay! So that's how we get there. And now that we've reached Percy's death, it's time to get into some gay stuff. Because Mary is iconic for thousands of reasons. But obviously, the reason, like I said at the beginning, the reason I wanted to talk about her in June is because she's not only the mother of horror, but also the mother of being a bisexual icon. And after Percy's death in 1822, she writes several things that we have now found that can kind of be the foundation for this, including a letter she wrote to close friend Edward Trelawney in 1835. And in the letter, her and her friend are discussing he's got a crush on a lady. And Mary is kind of commiserating about her loneliness after the loss of Percy. But she also takes time to acknowledge, "Hey, bud, I get it. I get why you like her. I
Mm.
do." And
Be
this
like,
is a
speaking of having a crush on a lady.
speaking of which, so this is a direct passage from Mary's letter in her words. "I do not wonder at your not being able to deny yourself the pleasure of Miss Norton's society. I never saw a woman I thought so fascinating. Had I been a man, I should have certainly fallen in love with her. As a woman, 10 years ago, I should have been spellbound, and had she taken the trouble, she might have wound me around her finger. 10 years ago, I was so ready to give myself away, and being afraid of men, I was apt to get tousy mousy for women. Experience and suffering have altered all of that. I am now more wrapped up in myself, my own feelings, disasters, and prospects for Percy. I am now proof, as Hamlet says, both against man and woman." So that's gay.
That's super gay.
Obviously, the time she's referring to 10 years ago would have been uh, right after Percy's death, because this is 1935 that she's
Mhm.
writing, or not 1935.
35.
Woo, 1835.
Wee!
Excuse
Mary
me.
Shelley got very old.
She lived to be 300. No, um, so yeah, 1835 is when she's writing this. Percy passed in 1822, so it's been a good amount of years here.
Mhm.
Um, and for those who don't know this, because why would you? Tousy Mousy, to which she is referring, is oldie slang for doing stuff with ladies. And it's not like flirting, it's an overtly like sexual connotation. So she is literally saying that she was so done with men that she would rather like be with women. And around this time, the 10-year gap that we're talking about, she also had a very close relationship with a woman named Jane Williams, who was a close friend of hers and Percy's when he was alive. And by close friend, I mean she was actually, Percy was sleeping with her also. um, but Jane was also married, and her husband was also good friends with them. They had kind of a little like thing going on.
Yeah,
They were all kind of
little
like a
polycule.
little polycule. They're all living together. They're very close. Um, and Percy and Edward, Jane's husband, in fact, are so close that they died together on a ship. They
Oh.
they 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 go on a
I I just love that. I mean, it just goes with the theme of this episode where you're like, you know what the gayest thing you can do is? Die together on a ship.
Yeah. Well, and they literally were like, "We're gonna go sailing in a storm. See you guys later." And Mary and Jane were like, "Maybe don't do that." And they were like, "No, we're super good at it." And then they drowned.
Apparently
And
not.
there was also a lot of like recorded documentation that Percy had had several what is it called, like premonition dreams of his
Yeah.
own death, that he was going to drown but then like
Oh, Percy.
refused to learn how to swim and then went
Percy.
sailing in a storm with his possibly gay lover, question mark. There was a lot happening. Percy also though just like had a death wish and was very macabre, which is why him and Mary worked, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
There's also like recorded instances where he kept trying to commit suicide and then like wanted Mary to like pull a Romeo and Juliet with him. And she was like, "What if instead we just eloped and didn't
She was
like
like,
we?"
Percy, chill.
She's like, "I'll have sex on my mother's grave, but this is where I draw the line." But after the death of both of their husbands in the sailing incident, Jane and Mary obviously have a very close relationship due to the mutual loss at the same time. And they bond real hard, and they start Jane goes back to England because they're living together in Italy at this point. And Jane returns to England and they start sending very passionate letters back and forth.
Hmm.
Um, which, you know, if we're gonna explain the gay away, sure, these women are experiencing extreme loss and are looking for comfort and intimacy. Sure. But also, it's highly theorized that they had a romantic and likely sexual relationship. And it is very likely that Jane was the first woman that Mary got tousy mousy with after Percy died. And in April 1925, so this is 3 years after, God, I keep saying 1825,
Yeah.
3 years after Percy's death, she wrote another letter that said, "When I return to Italy, I shall endeavor to enable her to go thither also. I shall not come without my Jane, who is now necessary to my existence almost entirely."
Oh.
So, very, very much passion and love between these women. Now, I suppose, like I said, this isn't hard proof of bisexuality, and I'm certain that there are lots of historians who will adamantly argue against this. But if Mary was bisexual, which I believe she was, it wouldn't be surprising given the very open minded way in which she was
Hmm.
raised. Also, as we've discussed previously, there are lots of queer undertones strewn through her writing.
Yeah.
Uh, it was so funny, you know, if you're listening to this in real time, we just did the Rocky Horror episode last week, and Penny literally talks
Yes.
about how Rocky Horror takes the subtext of Frankenstein and brings it out loud and in front. Um, and so, yeah, even though in that context we're talking more male homosexuality undertones, it's there. And
Yes.
she was writing from a personal perspective, right? And like I said, she's just association with Lord Byron at minimum should be like, oh, so you're also gay.
Yes.
There was lots of speculation that they were also like the Shelleys together were also kind of in a relationship with Lord Byron. Lots of disaster bisexual tendencies happening all around. Uh, but Mary was at least cool with the gays at minimum. And like I said, I heavily believe that she was one of us. There's also a really amazing story about Mary helping. So as she continues to write, her influence just skyrockets as Frankenstein becomes more popular, and um, Lord Byron throughout the whole time was like Team Mary. He was very
Hmm.
like loudly like she rocks, and everybody was like, yeah, she does. So even though it sucks, you know, being a woman at this time, the support of a man in high status was, a resounding like, yay.
Yeah.
And so she gets to a place where she's pretty affluent. She's using her money to unapologetically help women in who have been like cast off by society. So obviously a lot of women in like sexual scandals where they've had children out of wedlock or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And there's this really amazing story about Mary helping a woman who is pregnant escape to Italy and basically smuggling her out of the country with the help of this like swashbuckling lesbian lady who ran scams.
All
And
right.
the woman that like runs these scams does drag as a man and pretends to be pregnant women's husbands to smuggle them out of the country.
Iconic.
And Mary was like using her money to fund this to help women get to safety.
We need a movie about this.
Right? I was like, this is incredible. So it's there. Whether or not you want to believe it, it's there.
Yeah.
And whether or not Mary was queer, even though I really truly believe she was, she was just an iconic woman who was ahead of her time in so many ways. And we have literally the rest of horror history to thank like her for. She
Yes.
made it what it was. And I mean there are a thousand awesome ladies along that road as well. In preparation for this episode, I read the book that I have been talking about all over my platforms,
Hey!
Monster She Wrote. And I would highly, highly recommend you go check that out if you have interest in Mary or anything, relating to that. It's honestly, Mary is a pretty small portion of that book. It's amazing how many incredible women have paved the path for horror literature and film and everything. It's
Hell yeah. Hell yeah, they
very
have.
cool. Hell yeah, women.
Woo!
But that's a little dive into our girl Mary Shelley and all the wonderful, cool, crazy goth shit she did. Um, if you would like to tell us about how much you like hearing about Mary, let us know. I don't
Yeah.
know what that transition was. I'm so sorry. I
We're
got
getting there.
I got like stuck in my brainwave. Anyway, if you're enjoying Ghouls Night In, let us know. We can take reviews on Apple Podcasts, or if you cannot leave a review where you listen, please consider just DMing us on Instagram or whatever works for you. We're happy to accept reviews a multitude of ways, but I believe Penny has one for us today.
I sure do. This 5-star review comes from Bloody Clam and is titled Midge and Penny Are Spooktacular.
Spook.
Spooktacular. I found out about this show while binge watching Midge's YouTube channel. The
Aw.
second I began listening, I subscribed. These two ladies are a hoot, and their shows are well researched and packed with ghoulish factoids. They keep the shows fun with their catchy, upbeat banter and interesting topics. I'm always eagerly awaiting the next show to drop. Keep up the great work. I'm hooked. And then we've got a bunch of spooky emojis, and this is signed Lily M. So
Aw.
thank you very much, Lily.
Lily M. Lily Munster.
Lily Munster.
My mother.
Oh.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for that. And if you want to send us a review via a DM or just to keep up with what's going on here on the podcast, you can follow us over on Instagram at Ghouls Night in Pod. We also, I've noticed this week in particular, we've had a lot of folks buying Ghouls Night In merch. I've been getting lots of notifications about that. So that's very exciting. So thank you to those of you who bought sweatshirts and things this week. But if you would like to check that out, that is available. There's a link on our Instagram as well that you can check out sweatshirts and tote bags and t-shirts and stickers and mugs and the like. And if you are looking for me, you can find me across all platforms at Midge Munster.
And if you are looking for me, you can find me at Penny Snark.
And until next time, goodbye.